My name is Hazel Golden. The correct spelling is Golden, but unfortunately, when my father registered the marriage between him and my mum, the registrar misunderstood what he said and put down Golden instead of Goldin. So we have been Golden from ever since. Firstborn of my parents here in the UK, but my mum had one daughter and my dad had a son in Jamaica. But they met in Jamaica. My dad came here first. Afterwards, my dad sent for my mum, and I know they got married in October 1959, and I was amazingly born March 1960, which was, I remember when I was filling in forms at an older age, and I said to my mum, "You couldn't have got married in October 59 because I was born March 1960. You got the date wrong, Mum." She said, "Nope, the date is right." My sister, who I call Sissy, her name is Inez. Because I was always aware of my sister, there wasn't a sort of gap. It wasn't as if, oh, you have a sister so and so. There wasn't a gap. So my sister came here when I was very, very small, so there wasn't any sort of like trying to get to know somebody that I'd been told about. I've always been aware. She must have come here when I was very, very little, because it wasn't a thought in my head that, oh, my sister is coming from Jamaica. She must have come when I was a baby. Hence why I don't have this image in my head waiting for someone to come over. There is 22 years between myself and my sister, the age gap. And I also had a brother on my father's side, Henry, but Henry died when I was 15. Again, Henry was here in the UK. He was part of the British Army, and my first recollection of him was when he came off base, because he was based in Germany, and he would come and visit, always bringing gifts. So there wasn't any sort of gap between us, because I think we were very, very young. Well, to be honest, my first memory of my sister is with her children, because of course, with there being over a 20-year gap between us, I only ever remember her as being here. I have no memory of thinking of her coming over here. So I know she got married here in the UK because we have the photographs at home. I know all her children were born here, apart from one, Tony. He was born in Jamaica. He never actually came to the UK until he was in his 60s, actually. Again, because there is such a big age gap between myself and my sister, and as I said, Henry was already here because he was in the army, there wasn't any feeling of loss. The only time that I was aware of any anxiety or upset or anything was my sister's son that was left in Jamaica, because Tony was left with his grandmother, and I was always aware money was being sent back for him. And then, of course, I also know that my grandmother died the year I was born. So I've never actually really experienced saying, oh, I have a sister in Jamaica waiting for her to come over, because she must have come here when I was very, very young, because I have no feelings of any sort of like separation or trying to get to know her. My sister, because she had quite a few children when she got married here, and the fact that he was left in Jamaica, he was left with my grandmother, who died the year I was born, so she passed away in 1960, and he was brought up by other family members. And my only recollection that something was not is that when he himself said that he didn't have it easy growing up in Jamaica, which none of us were aware of. We always assumed that everything was fine because money and stuff was always being sent to him. But meeting him as an adult, where he actually said he didn't have it easy at all, and that was the first indication that he was experiencing a loss greater than us because we thought he was being taken care of. Well, the impact on my sister having left her son in Jamaica is that she constantly was always looking out for him, always, having to include or even remind the children that she had here. You have a brother in Jamaica, his name is Tony, so that they, even though they have brothers and sisters, the family wasn't just the ones that were here in the UK. They knew that they had another sibling in Jamaica. I don't recall my sister living with me at all. In fact, it was always us going to her house and she coming to our house, and that was a regular thing on a Sunday. So we would go to her house and the children and we'd play, and then on a Sunday we'd be at home, and her husband, we'd see him coming down the road with all the children, one behind another, coming to visit us because they were coming to visit their grandmother. And in fact, she's my half-sister because she's my mum's daughter but not my father's. But because she never lived at home with me, I would say that our relationship must have been different in that we didn't do things together because she had her own family. So it wasn't the case that, we did each other's hair or we dressed each other or we went out and socialised, because there's that huge age gap between us. So I would say it was different, but to me she was always my sister. When my mother died, the relationship changed a bit because then she acted like she was my mum. But there was never ever any question about us being sisters, but we didn't have the sister relationship in the fact that because of the age gap and she had her own home, I lived at home with my mum and dad. We didn't do the normal sister things of doing each other because she had a family to bring up. I would say I became more of an older sister to her children. They call me auntie now, but because I was more of their age, there's only a year difference between myself and my niece. So effectively I was more a sister to her children, and she was quite happy because I'm the auntie, for when I went out and socialised, that they came out and socialised with me. When we travelled, or go to parties or whatever, they came with me. So that sister relationship was more with my nieces, and my sister was happy for them to be with me because I was officially their auntie. When people asked me who the person was, I said my sister, and then they always questioned the fact because there's such a big age gap. But it was never something that was in any doubt for myself or my brothers. It was just accepted. She's my sister. And after my mum passed, growing up where my mum was present, no, she didn't. Because I said, I think her priority was her family. She had, I think there's 7 children, so that was her priority. Well, the dynamics wasn't difficult between myself and my sister. She always treated me like a sister and introduced me to other people as being her sister. It only changed when my mum passed. Then I think she took on the role as acting like my mum. But I think the reason she did that is because I lived at home with my parents. I didn't actually leave home. So she knew the loss was great and actually, became a comforter to me. Did I think having an older sister was beneficial for me when my mum passed? Yes, because I told my mum a lot. It was the same with my dad. I didn't actually keep secrets from them. And having somebody take on the responsibility, or i.e. being in charge, helped me cope during that time, because, as I said, I never left home. So I was there for my mum, I was there for my dad, and having somebody actually say, no, you need to do this or you need to do that, helped me to make decisions. So yes, it was beneficial for me. How did my parents adapt to starting a new life in the UK? I wasn't aware that they had to make any adaptation until I was probably of school age. I didn't realise the difficulties they encountered until they asked me to fill in forms, and then I became aware of the obstacles that they encountered. When, as a child, you're in school, you don't notice that there is a difference, and I only noticed a difference when I saw other people reacted. So, growing up in a West Indian home, when I was home, everybody spoke patois. Then when I went to school, you notice a difference. I think initially the difference I noticed was food that we had at home, and then we'd go to school, and this is from primary school, what we were given at school, and it was like, it was something that I wasn't used to, and that was the only sort of like initially inkling that something was different. And then when you have to fill in legal documentation and the questions, and I was asked to fill in the forms, that is where I became aware that I was living in a Jamaican household, but when I went to school, I was in the minority in terms of the language. Again, as I got older, is when listening to my parents and when people came to the house and the way they spoke about their experiences, the things that they encountered, was then it sort of like brought it home. What they are experiencing is like a challenge, something that they have to deal with all the time. And even more so with my dad. My dad always seemed to be the protector. If anything happened, Mum usually had to coax Dad down. And we as children also became aware, if anything happened to us at school, was not to let Dad hear, because he would challenge it straight away. We knew, tell Mum, and then Mum would make the decision, because we encountered racism at school. Things would happen. But my father was somebody that wouldn't tolerate anybody picking on us or doing anything to us. Sometimes, I remember with my brother, something happened, somebody hit him at school, and he overheard the conversation, and without even waiting, he turned round and he was walking down to the school. He wore a donkey jacket, he had his Wellington boots, he'd just come in from work, but he would never ever tolerate anybody taking advantage of us. So as quite early on we learnt, don't let Dad hear, because he would challenge them. And the reason that we would keep quiet about it, we were aware that Dad would get into trouble. So we learnt quite early on, don't say anything. We let Mum know, but don't let it reach my dad's ears. Their decision to move to the UK was mainly to do with work. It was difficult where they lived, making a living. My dad was a farmer, my mum was a domestic, and because they had three of us here in the UK, I don't think it was like a 5-year plan, because of course at that time I wasn't aware anybody was left apart from, which effectively my nephew was left in Jamaica. So it wasn't a case of a 5-year plan, but initially the plan was, just to make a better living for themselves. So we grew up in a household where we had, both my parents actually were working. Dad, he worked at the foundry. My mum worked at was Debenhams. But then when she had me, she looked after other people's children. So I always remember children being in the house. There was a pram, people, when they, well, basically what you call a nursery, where people went to work, they would leave their children with my mum. So that's how they made their living. But I'm not aware that they had any regrets. Things that I'm aware of as being a child is them always making sure that they supported the family back in Jamaica. As a young child, I was writing the letters, and I remember the lines of letters. I hope when these few lines reach you, they find you in good health. I can only answer for my mum in that my grandfather was still alive and I was aware of my grandfather. My grandmother died the year I was born, 1960. There was a bit of an age gap between my mum and my dad because my dad was born 1906 and of course I was born 1960. So I'm not sure if I asked the question of when my dad's parents passed away, but I assume that they had passed away because growing up, the only conversation I recall having with my parents was about my mum's father, and he died when I was a teenager. But I sometimes think dealing with everyday life here in the UK must have been the thing that they concentrated on. But I do know that Mum talked about her father, sent stuff back for her father, and I still have some of the letters, the correspondence between my mum and her dad. You know, they spoke about each other, Mr. Because Mum wasn't very well, he sent stuff to help her because of ill health when she came to the UK. So there was correspondence where it showed that they had affection for each other. The things they wrote about, Mum suffered unfortunately from ill health when she came to the UK. He inquired about how she was doing. He'd asked about the children. He would ask about her husband, my dad, and Mum, when she wrote back, she would make inquiries about how he was doing. Did he receive the things that she sent? And the conversation was generally around that. Mum never saw her father again. In fact, Mum never actually made it back to Jamaica. The only member of the family who made it back to Jamaica was my dad. And I remember taking my dad to the airport with my niece, and he went to stay with his sister in Watermount, St. Catherine. I remember when we went to pick him up from the airport, because Dad had been in England for so long, his body had totally adjusted to the English weather, to the English food, and yes, he had a bad bout of diarrhea when he was in Jamaica. His body had totally adjusted to UK food and the living over here. And in fact, he said, Hazel, S-H-I-T, I-S-A-H-T, I-S-A-H-T, because his body just was used to UK food and he couldn't adjust. And he only went back to Jamaica once. I'm trying to think how old he was when he went. I can't think right now. I probably would be able to find it because I must have been over 20. Reason being is that, so he would have been in his 70s actually. Yeah, he'd have to be 70 something because I was driving and I drove him to the airport. But his exact age I can't recall. So he'd been in the UK over, must have been 20 years, and during that time his body had totally acclimatized to UK weather, UK food, that he basically had the runs the entire time he was there. The reason my mum didn't go back to Jamaica, I think, was because Mum was sickly. For my entire life, Mum was always ill, and I think because of that, that's why she didn't travel. She was 65 when she passed away. As a child, I even remember having home help because Mum wasn't very well. But it was just unfortunate, yeah, Mum wasn't very well at all. But Mum was always there, always doing stuff for us. And if she couldn't do stuff for her, friends would help. and of course my dad. Um, I don't have any children basically because I stayed home and looked after my mum and dad. Because as fortunate as my mum wasn't very well, um, basically with her legs, and then later on, mum developed dementia, and when mum passed away, then my dad he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, so I stayed at home, and I had to prioritize because they never received a full pension because they were deemed as not having enough insurance stamp. So I had to work as well. So between my sister and my nieces, taking it in turns to look after mum and dad, when I went to work, somebody would come and keep an eye on my mum, and so it was a case of I had to prioritize, and I didn't actually envisage me doing both, so that's why I don't have any children. My relationship with my parents' home country is good. When I go out to Jamaica, I do stay in Watermount. The majority of the time I do stay in an Airbnb. It's my preferred way of staying in Jamaica, and then I go out into country. Reason being is that where my family is from, there's still no running water. It's not an issue for me. Just collect the water in the barrel, just boil the kettle, and you have a bath. The electric sometimes goes out, just one of those things. But I generally stay either in Kingston or I stay in Mobay, and I make my way up to country. The thing that I recall the very first time I went to Jamaica was my dad crying. My mum had passed away at that time, and he was worried because my temperament is more like my mum. I'm quiet. I'm not the aggressive. Well, I don't shout. And Dad was worried that something was going to happen to me, and I just remember him crying, and my friend saying, "Don't worry, Mister. They'll look after you. We'll look after her." But he was worried because he didn't think my temperament I would be okay. But I do travel around in Jamaica. I take a taxi. I get myself to Spanish Town, and then I know when I get into Spanish Town, I know where to pick up the taxi to get up to Watermount, and I just do it. But I'm aware of the reactions of people because my accent is so English that would be an obstacle for me, but I've never experienced any problems. If I need to go somewhere, I just go. How do I view the decision of my parents moving to the UK? Is it positive or negative? It can be both, because the thing is, it's a difficult one to answer because you don't know what tomorrow will bring. If my parents stayed in Jamaica, my experience of seeing, where other family members are still in Jamaica, it could have been good. Their decision to move to the UK, that also has been positive one for them, and it could also be a negative one. So either way, because we don't know what the future holds, I think it could swing both ways, positive and negative, because the experiences of family members still in Jamaica, they appear happy. They work the land, they grow their own vegetables. As I said, my father was a farmer. I find country life totally relaxing. It's quiet, everybody knows everybody. But it's the same as growing up when they were alive. It was the same here because everybody that came from that area all settled in the same area within Gloucester. Everybody knew everybody got together. So I don't think one country outweighs the other. I think my worst experiences growing up for a migrant family is the fact that we've had to do things to protect my parents, in that where they would challenge things, and because Mum was at home because she worked at Debenhams and stopped working straight after, is that where my dad will face things head on And we were aware of both sides because of going to school here and also living in a Caribbean household and listening to other people or, hearing the other conversations. We always had to do things to protect them. Dad would challenge things and I would have to reword things to soften it so that we knew that there wasn't any real backlash on him. It's a bit like in the workplace. When you go into a workplace, you have to adopt a certain style. You basically learn to fit in. And then the moment that you're outside work, then you're allowed to be yourself. Because of, you see how people react, you having to temper your real self. And then when you come outside, the same with school, you can be your true self. Best experience from coming from a Caribbean heritage, I would say, is, I suppose, when we all get together and you see the joy when they laugh about things, when they're telling things about stories about their upbringing and things that they used to do, and those stories are unique because the only stories that you're being fed are the ones by media or on TV. But when they talk about it and you see mum and dad, oh yes, such and such and such and such, and you sit there and you listen, you think, oh wow. So it's the unique experience and the joy when they talk about home.